Well, good morning to people across the pond. Good afternoon if you're here in the UK. Just make sure everything's working as it should be. It seems to be okay, so let's make sure by doing that. And that one. Just make sure that when it comes to the showing you the article that I've got, that everything's up and working okay. What I wanted to mention first of all, of course, really looking forward to this coming weekend having a chat on Eric Oze's channel with none other than Dr. Richard Leo, an expert on coerced false confessions, written loads of books. He's been around for a good many years and has done several works in conjunction with our very own Steve Drizzen. So really looking forward to that. That's this Saturday, well, UK time, midnight. Hi there, Bean Green. American time, 6 o'clock Central. That's 7 o'clock Eastern time and 4 o'clock Pacific time on, as I say, Eric Oze's channel. So looking forward to that. Talking about Eric Oze, I've enjoyed finding out more and more about the Daniel Holtzclaw case, and it struck me how the people who are in support of Daniel Holtzclaw are like ourselves, truthers, who simply want the truth in the same way that we want the truth about what happened with Teresa Holbach. We come up against guilters, some of whom I think are simply misguided. It was interesting watching the Henbury video that he did. I saw yesterday a short 15-minute video in which he's got news articles, mainly by WBA, the opening one of which is when Teresa is merely a missing person. And it struck me that we've got Stephen Avery being interviewed on TV, on the local news, the Wisconsin news, the state news service have come to him for an interview, and he's still in the clothes that he was wearing when he was working in the garage, oily rags on. He looks like a tramp. And we know that he's got some nice clothes because we see him wearing some nice clothes, but it wasn't a case of him feeling as if he needed to do anything special to impress anybody with regards to the cameras. And it struck me how anybody watching that and listening to those opening presentations, news items, and they're talking about the fact that, the last call was Stephen Avery. You can kind of understand why some people would, particularly having been to Manitowoc and Wisconsin County, you can kind of see how some people would get the impression, oh, it's that guy that's got off on a technicality and now he's trying to sue for 36 million. Bet it's him. It was interesting how, for me, the whole way in which he appeared. We know that it's because that's just the way he is. He's very laissez-faire attitude. It was no skin off his nose that they were coming and talking to him, but he certainly wasn't going to go out to his way to dress up smartly for it, and sort of try and change his appearance and who he is. Anyway, it was just an observation of mine which sort of struck me. You can imagine if that happened here in Scotland, in the borders, somebody that looks, shall we say, a bit of a tramp, might be thought of as being, that's a potential suspect. Anyway, gone up thinking about the, as I say, the group, the truther community and the guilter community. In the Daniel Holtzclaw case, you've got Rather worryingly, you've got these the Oklahoma City what do they call artists for Justice, yeah, OKC Artists for Justice, and I can't help thinking that they simply don't know, they don't realize, they don't have the information to see the harm that they're doing. Talking about Facebook groups, I had never been in a Facebook group until I joined the official family Facebook group, the one that Carla started off. And that was only because I'd spoken to Robert Herman, and he said that there was such groups. I had never been in a Facebook group before that. Chatted on Messenger, but never been in any actual groups before. So thank you, Robert. And I think that having watched some of the documentaries, for example, Henry Lee Lucas in The Confession Killer, we see a group of ladies get together, putting huge pressure on then, I think it was Governor George Bush, to do something with Henry Lee Lucas. And we see these pressure groups that are looking to execute people who are on death row. And that was certainly the case with Henry Lucas, that, they wanted him, or did they want him further investigated? And I wonder about something like the, Artists for Justice in Oklahoma, whether they're a bit misguided in their advocacy, for conviction, and Daniel getting this huge sentence. Whereas, for example, the truther communities that I know of, all we're asking is the simple question: are you sure? Are you sure they're guilty? Were they proven guilty beyond a reasonable date? Interesting, isn't it, how David Rudolph suggests in The Staircase that one of the good things about Scotland is that we have guilty, innocent, and not proven. Although, having spoken with, for example, a retired police chief, he was pointing out that not proven is not quite as good as you might think, because the person going back to that community to live in always has that suspicion. But it would be a lot better than the jurors simply acquiescing to the prosecution on the most flimsy, whimsical evidence you can imagine. Certainly in the case of Daniel Holtzclaw and Stephen Brendan and others. It really is a case of, let's try and find the truth. Let's try and find out what really happened. And I'm reminded of the other Netflix documentary, Don't F with Cats, how brilliant it was that Facebook group managed to track down Luca Magnotta and have him arrested. So there are groups out there that do huge good. I'm suggesting that there are others who, whilst trying to do good, are simply misguided. The haters, on the other hand, why wouldn't they want the truth? What have they got to hide? I think we can all work out that they've obviously got some sort of vested interest in that, in the various cases. Anyway, I'm not going to keep you very long. As I say, it's this Saturday. We've got Mr. Richard Leo going to join the dude, myself, Tracy Keogh, hoping Mark Hoddenet's going to be able to join in, so that we've got a sort of panel, and we can put questions to him. Hopefully the dude will get to ask his favorite question about the control question. Me, I'm still searching for the Holy Grail. I'm still of the opinion that had Brendan Brendan's case not being appealed by Brad Schimmel, and the state had simply accepted Judge Duffin's decision and just let Brendan go. I'm still of the opinion that that would be the first time ever that somebody's wrongful conviction would have been overturned based purely on the fact that the courts realized that the confession was coerced. Because I think it would have been before the Huey Burton case. But anyway, I'm curious, because most of these wrongful convictions that involve coerced confessions, what actually sets people free is DNA testing or witnesses coming forward. But to actually be purely exonerated purely on accepting the fact that people do confess falsely, I think that would have been an interesting, almost a monumental decision that would have changed quite a lot of other cases potentially. Anyway, let's have a look at the article by Dr. Richard Leo. As I say, Dr. Richard Leo was somebody that gave an affidavit in Brendan Dass's case at the appeal stage that Judge Duffin listened to and realised that he'd got it absolutely right. So as I say, I can't. Well, let's make this clear. I've said this all along. Anybody that comes on the channel and talks about any aspect of stuff, they're always very welcome, and we're always very lucky that people are prepared to do it. But when you get somebody that's so close to the case, somebody that's had such an impact on it already, then obviously it's quite exciting. So I'm not saying that any guest is more important than another. Definitely not. Everybody that comes on and has a chat is equally significant. But as I say, Richard Leo has something unique to offer, hopefully. Anyway, let's have a look at the article, and we'll take it from there. Let's. I'll have to do this, I'm afraid, because my eyesight is not fantastic. Or will it work? Let's see. Let's see. Hold on a sec. Let's see if it'll work. If I do this, yes, I think I'll be fine. I think I'll be fine like that. Yeah, I think I'll be fine. Apart from the echo. Here we go then. So here is an article, a very short article, death penalty focus. I was actually hoping to read some opinions about death penalty, but that wasn't what they were interviewing Richard Leo about. So this was just over a year ago. And as Dr. Richard Leo wrote, everyone has a breaking point. Anyone can be convinced to confess, to lie. And it's not only that they can, but they do it at great risk to their future. It's deeply fascinating and deeply troubling. The idea that someone would give a false confession is so counterintuitive. It fascinates me intellectually, says Richard Leo, a professor of law and psychology at University of San Francisco's Law School. Leo is an expert on false confessions, police interrogation practices, psychological coercion, and the wrongful conviction of the innocent. He has written at least 6 books on these subjects and hundreds of articles and research papers. In fact, I've just ordered up one of his books on Amazon today, so I'm slowly but surely getting the ones that I've ordered. This is interesting because, mind, I was saying about how some people become know more and more about less and less, or words to that effect. And some people remain in the sort of academic arena all their life. But I did like this next statement. I always knew I was going to be a professor, but I didn't want to be a kind of professor academic. I wanted to develop an area of expertise, apply it in the real world, and bring the research into arenas where it can benefit real people. He's done far more than that. Just a few of the false confession cases he's worked on include exonerees Earl Washington, as well as Jesse Miskelly Jr. of the West Memphis 3, 2 of the Central Park jogger defendants, and the Norfolk 4. Just before I read this next sentence, I'm reminded of a comment by Travis Williamson, and he did say, be aware of the fact that Richard Leo, at least publicly, I added that bit, is going to defend law enforcement, and you're not going to get somebody that's going to decry all law enforcement, and even like Sir Wiegert and Fassbender publicly, he's not going to be too critical of them. And this next sentence tends to back that up. Police-induced false confessions are a leading cause of wrongful conviction, according to Leo. But what's most interesting is, I don't believe police maliciously set out to frame innocent people. Instead, they get invested in a particular theory. They strongly believe that person's guilty, and that overrides any exculpatory evidence. And I just wonder if that also applies to the guilters. They just cannot bring themselves to see that they might be wrong. Anyway, Leo studied the situation in Chicago, the false conviction capital of the United States. It's a huge, huge problem. Because they're so convinced the person's guilty, they'll feed them details, psychologically coerce them. But the contamination, i.e. feeding the suspect non-public details that are not easily guessed by chance, is often inadvertent. This next line, very interesting. They're making a murderer. They'll ask him several times how the victim was killed. He, the suspect, is guessing. Eventually, they just tell him. They don't realize they're feeding those details. The contamination is often inadvertent, though egregious. It's usually just a rush to judgment. But they can and need to do better. I find that sentence very, very interesting. They're making a murderer. Yeah, very, very well put, Dr. Leo. Anyway, compounding the problem is human nature. He says if a person is innocent and the police ask him or her to come to the station house just to answer a few questions, they don't think there's a need to talk to their lawyer. They go involuntary, assuming that they have the presumption of innocence. They aren't expecting or prepared for the psychological coercion they'll be subjected to. A lot of people overestimate the strength of their personalities. And if your nature or personality is compliant, if you're a people pleaser or a doormat, what we call an eggshell defendant, you're even more vulnerable. He carries on. If I hadn't chosen this career, I think even I, like just about anyone else, could be made to give a false confession. We all have a breaking point. Well, Richard Leo says he isn't sure there's a way to eliminate the problem. He believes that if there were more mandatory electronic videotaping or recording of all interrogations for all crimes, you could put a big dent in the number of false confessions, wrongful convictions, and psychological coercion, and vastly improve police interrogation practices. Because as it stands now, police have one version, defendants another. Invariably, the suspect says they threatened me, lied to me. The cops say we didn't do any of that. He confessed. What he said and done that got the person to. What was said and done that got the person to falsely confess. Where did these details come from? If you have mandatory electronic recording, the police can review it. But more importantly, prosecutors can review it. It means prosecutors won't charge suspects just because they made a statement, but will be able to first evaluate what interrogation practices and pressures produced the statement. Tracking the number of false confessions would be another corrective. As it stands now, neither the government nor any criminal justice organisations keep records of the number of interrogations that are conducted by law enforcement. Wow. So there's no way to randomly sample them to get a rate at which police interrogate suspects or how often they lead to confessions, much less false confessions. I'd like to think the problem is getting better because, and I do agree with this next statement. This is something I've been going on about for ages now. The Netflix effect. I'd like to think the problem is getting better because when the older generation moves out of the criminal system, prosecutors who've been in it for 30 years, they're being replaced by younger people who grew up in the 90s and 2000s, reading story after story about DNA exonerations and people getting off death row. So if you're in your 60s, your formative years were in the 1960s and 1970s, when everybody assumed false confessions didn't occur. But the younger people have lived through a different era and were formed by different experiences. He says he's noticed a change when he testifies in court. This is interesting. In the 25 years I've been testifying and working on cases, there's been a marked difference in prosecutors' demeanour. They used to be condescending and angry, as if they had to destroy me. Now there's more professionalism. They acknowledge my expertise in a way that doesn't try to undermine me. So, well, hi everybody. Yeah, some interesting bits there. I did like the making a murderer comment. I say I've got some questions all lined up for Richard Lee. I'm pretty sure he's got another book coming out, and I know for a fact that although there's nothing in the pipeline just yet, that he's going to do another look at false confessions in the post-DNA world. Originally, him and Steve Drizin did the largest assessment of 125 cases. They're now looking at doing a follow-up with 250 examples of false confessions in the post-DNA world. Anyway, that's really all I've got time for today. Let's keep checking out the dude's videos about Daniel Holtzclaw. And as I say, we look forward to eventually the District 2 of the Court of Appeals coming to a decision about what to do. Let's fingers crossed, hope that Jerry's spot on, that they order an evidentiary hearing and a different judge. And I think that would be most beneficial. I think Judge Angie has truly shown what sort of corruption she's prepared to accept within the District 2. Anyway, really that's all I've got time for today. We'll catch you later. Bye for now.